Joining me now, though, our next guest in the program is Labor Senator Jenny McAllister. Thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
The situation in New South Wales is still a huge concern. Obviously, you can feel a long way away when you're not there, but for the people on the ground, they'll be pretty terrified, some of them this afternoon.
Yeah, this is a really difficult day for New South Wales, and lots of the areas that are impacted in northern New South Wales and on the North Coast are places I know quite well. I grew up in the Tweed, and so those communities around Lismore, Grafton, down towards Coffs that are being impacted by some of these big out-of-control blazes are communities that I know. There are also communities that are really strong. They're very resilient, they're very community focused. I know that people will be looking out for each other and looking out for their neighbours, but my heart really goes out to them because this is a really difficult day.
Yeah, I think one of the community strength elements was sort of exemplified by a note for some fireys saying, sorry, they had to take some milk from a house that they had saved. They couldn't save the shed, they saved the home. They said they owed them some milk. So I think it goes to that.
I actually know that man.
There you go.
So I think if it's the same note, I saw that posted on Twitter, and I know the man who posted that, and I'm so pleased for him that his house was saved. And it's a lovely story about the interaction between a person in the community who's been affected and these volunteers who risk so much to help other people.
And it's not at all to dismiss the seriousness and the extent to which communities in the bush get hit by this, but I think probably a shock for some people that all of Greater Sydney is now on this catastrophic level. Right. It doesn't mean the whole of the city is going to burn down, of course, but that any bushfire regions, they're at this catastrophic level in November.
It is really shocking, and I think the words used by a lot of the professional and volunteer forces are that these are unprecedented conditions. It's very unusual indeed to have so much of New South Wales so significantly impacted so early in the year.
Some of these people would be looking back at their politicians and maybe shaking their head. We've had the Green Senator Jordan Steele-John. He was objecting to debate going on today to do with the so-called big stick energy legislation bill. He says the Coalition and Labor are borderline arsonists. Barnaby Joyce is talking about two people who have died being likely Greens voters. He clarified he wasn't attacking them, but it seemed like a strange thing to bring up. What have you made of the discourse here in Canberra?
I think that is incredibly disappointing. No one on our side, thinking about Senator Steele-John's remarks, no one on our side disputes the science of climate change. But today, I think some of these people might be missing the fact that there are people on the ground who are having a very difficult day today. And I think the last thing that they need is to hear that people down in Canberra are taking potshots at one another, seeking to make political points or to score political points off their very personal stories. And as Senator Wong indicated yesterday, there will be a time to talk about the causes, but people in country New South Wales, people worried about their properties in the Illawarra or Sydney or the Hunter, just need to know that people in Canberra are 100% focused on the operational response and on supporting them at this time today.
And we've got obviously, the government talking about measures being taken, even potentially Army reservists being called up. Right. Nonetheless, there are also people out there who are saying, well, we do want a conversation, a pretty serious one. We don't want this to be the permanent future or even worse than that. Does this impact your thinking at all in terms of the future to do with climate change and taking action and the stand that Labor might take?
As I said, no one in our team disputes the science of climate change, and in fact we've been advocating for a very long time about a serious climate response, and that's informed by some of the information scientists have been telling us for a very long time. But right now, the people who are facing down a fire front or who are out there volunteering to help their neighbours or are mourning a person who has died in the fire, they don't need to hear us fighting about the causes of the fire. They need to know they have our 100% attention right now.
Without fighting over the causes, though, it is coming just after the Labor review that spoke about there was too much rhetoric that, might have scared off people that were coal workers or involved in the industry in some way. Is this the other side of the coin, that people should know that Labor won't be worried if they need to take a stand that does say, well, here's a point at which we stop using coal, here's a point at which we shouldn't necessarily be exporting coal, the biggest exporter in the world?
I think, as I said, our focus is on the people who are facing something really difficult. We've said as part of the review that all of our policies are up for discussion, but what isn't up for discussion is our commitment to serious action on climate change. That hasn't changed for a decade, at least. It's not going to change under any Labor administration that I can imagine.
And that, I guess, when you say change, you know, a huge pulling back of the target, for example, the emissions reduction target, that would constitute a change in effect, so you wouldn't imagine Labor would go down that path?
Look, as I said, today is not the day to have a deep conversation about climate policy. It is a day to focus on the operational questions facing the many people who are impacted by the fires. But yes, our principles are clear. We will be guided by the science, and we will propose action at the appropriate time, approaching an election that is commensurate with the science.
All right, well, we'll have a discussion perhaps more in depth on another day. Did you want to finish with a message to your people in New South Wales?
Well, just look after each other. Listen to the guidance from the RFS and know that there are plenty of people here in Canberra thinking about you and really wishing that people can stay safe over the next 24 hours.